Progress Report Medical and Healthcare Committee Led by the Royal Thai Government, the Ministry of Public Health, Ministry of Tourism and Sports, and the IMAC Organizing Committee, all departments stresses the importance of public health and safety during the event. Counter COVID-19 measures will be implemented following the same procedural guidelines and standards of Tokyo 2020 Olympic Games. Medical services during the Games will be provided according to the OCA Medical Services Guide and under the supervision of the OCA Medical Committee. These will be organized by the IMAC Organizing Committee in cooperation with the Ministry of Public Health in Thailand. Athlete medical rooms and spectator medical rooms will be available at each competition venue. Athletes' medical services will provide field of play recovery and emergency services. Emergency medical units, which consist of doctors, nurses, medical supplies, and ambulance services, will be present at official venues throughout the competition. In case that requires advanced medical treatment, the team will provide ambulance services to deliver patients to larger hospitals as appropriate. Medical services at accommodation sites. The main hotel centers will have a first aid team which consists of medical supplies and medicine. In the case of a medical emergency, IMAC Organizing Committee staff will coordinate with local medicinal services. Public health services. Public health services are also put in place throughout Thailand. These services include, but are not limited to, disease surveillance, communicable disease control, health protection such as food, water, and air quality. Doping control. The doping control program will be implemented in accordance with WADA international standards for testing and investigations and the OCA anti-doping rules to work towards a fair, equal, and healthy competition. IMAC Organizing Committee will be developing and implementing doping control in collaboration with the OCA Medical Committee. The purpose of the doping control program is to test and analyze samples with high efficiency and good quality. It is to educate and inform the athletes regarding dangers to health of using banned substances and the procedures and steps done during the doping process. Therapeutic use exemption and status of medication. It is the personal responsibility of participating athletes to determine whether a substance that they are using or consider using for medical purpose is prohibited or not. Before and during the games, athletes are strongly advised to check the status of the medication that they're using or taking or intend to take through the WADA website. All athletes participating in the games must be in possession of a therapeutic use exemption (TUE) if they need to use a medication that is included in the list of prohibited substances and methods. The healthcare and medical program will provide first aid and emergency response medical services, including necessary hospital admission and treatment, free of charge to all members of the Games family. The organizing committee has submitted a competition health plan drafted in compliance with the OCA Counter COVID-19 event guidelines. Together with the local public health authorities, the organizing committee and the OCA will work cooperatively to ensure health and safety for all participants. Some of the mandatory requirements prior to entering Thailand and upon arrival includes the requirement for all participants to conduct and present PCR tests from their port of departure with results obtained within the previous 48 hours. As the event is being planned and held during a COVID-19 global pandemic that continues to impose significant challenges, the hosting of the sporting events will strictly follow the OCA COVID-19 guidelines. The management and implementation of guidelines will follow recommendations from the World Health Organization, WHO, and the Thai National Health Authorities. The OCA has advised that during the evolving COVID-19 outbreak, effective protection of the health and safety of athletes must remain a priority. Under the OCA regulations, the IMAC Organizing Committee will ensure all athletes are covered by adequate measures to protect their health and that they have access to prompt medical care while participating in the event. These guidelines will extend to all athletes, coaches, volunteers, officials, spectators, and organizing committee staff. Pre-competition testing. Only the participants with evidence of a recent negative COVID-19 PCR test before 48 hours will be eligible to attend or take part in the 6th IMAC. This applies to all accredited participants, including officials, coaches, staff, athletes' entourage, media, technical staff, sponsors, TV broadcasting staff, volunteers, and all other personnel related to the event. Therefore, these participants must follow and strictly follow the protocol hereunder. Athletes and everyone in the delegation, as well as officials, have to take a negative PCR test not older than 48 hours and bring the original copy to the event. All related costs to this test are borne as follows. PCR tests before arriving to Thailand are covered by the NOCs. PCR tests after arrival in Thailand are covered by the IMAC Organizing Committee. Should the NOCs require a PCR test before the departure back home from the Games, costs are to be covered by NOCs. All incoming participants will be tested for COVID-19 through the PCR test once again upon arrival at the airport. NOC's COVID-19 Medical Coordinator, CMC. Prior to the Games, all NOC's delegations should appoint an English-speaking COVID-19 medical coordinator who will be responsible for ensuring all mitigation measures are followed by athletes and officials of the delegations. The CMC will be the liaison officer with the IMAC Organizing Committee, COVID-19 Chief Game Officer, and the OCA Medical and Doping Control Delegate. The CMC should work in close cooperation with the NOC's medical officer or doctor to daily monitor the health conditions of NOC's delegation members and report it back to the IMAC Organizing Committee, COVID-19 Chief Game Officer, CGO, and the OCA Medical and Doping Control Delegates. The protocol for all participants for COVID-19 are as follows. OCA family, officials, athletes, and others shall go into quarantine in their hotel rooms until the results of the PCR test is negative. Athletes and coaches are then allowed to train if the PCR result is negative. Other delegations members not in a bubble before the event shall remain in quarantine until the PCR results are negative. If the PCR results are positive, the person will go into quarantine and isolated and retested of the PCR. If the result is again positive, then the person in question will go into quarantine in accordance with the Thailand National Health Regulations. All participants shall take PCR tests every 3 days during the competition. How to consider PCR tests. If the CT value is less than 30, the person goes into quarantine and the close contacts are monitored as defined in the protocol. This resembles a true infection. If CT value is between 30 to 35, the person goes into quarantine and is monitored. An antibody test and a new PCR test shall be performed. If the antibody test is positive and the CT value of the second PCR is the same as the first PCR, then the person shall remain in quarantine and a new PCR test shall be repeated 5 days later. If the CT value is greater than 35, the person goes into quarantine. The PCR is repeated immediately and an antibody test shall be performed. If a previous infection is documented or if the antibody is positive, the antigen test is negative, and the repeated PCR shows same CT values or higher, then the athlete shall be allowed to resume participation. Any case of a positive antigen test means this is a true infection. It is advised that NOCs fully brief all delegations on COVID-19 measures in order to always follow the hygiene guidelines. When entering and leaving venues, athletes must comply with the minimum distancing rule during warm-up, playing time, halftime, and after the match. Precautions before competition. Handshaking between two teams, referees, officials during pre-match procedure is prohibited. Precautions during competition. During the games, face masks must be worn by everyone except by the players, team officials, and referees on the field of play. Alcohol sanitizers will be provided for athletes and team officials on the bench. Precautions after the competition. Athletes and officials must leave the arena after the competition. Declaration of responsibility. Each accredited person and participant must complete and sign the Declaration of Responsibility forms prior to the participation at the Games. More information on COVID-19 procedures will be shortly sent to all NOCs. For this IMAC competition, the bubble concept will be applied with the aim of minimizing the transmission of COVID-19 infections before, during, and after the sporting event. All stakeholders involved in the event will enter the bubble without any external contact within 3 days before and throughout the event. The bubble concept will be applied to, but not limited to, NOC IF officials, AF members, technical delegates, event delegates, OCA office staff, members of the press, participating NOC teams, athletes, officials, referees, technical staff, sponsors, organizing committee members, drivers, hotel staff, team guides, catering staffs, and waiters. Doctors, medical staff, doping control officers, chaperones at training halls and within all competition venues will also be subject to the bubble and seal concept. Additionally, during the competition, masks are to be worn by all staff and participants at all times except during competition. IMAC Organizing Committee defines the bubble space according to the competition venue and hotel of participants. Athletes and officials' accommodation are located in hotels throughout both competition cities in Bangkok and Chonburi. Depending on the sport competition venue, accommodation of those delegates are once again within 10 kilometers radius. With this, the 6 IMAC participants will be operating under multiple bubbles throughout the competition venues and accommodation. Within the competition sites, spectator seats allocation will be limited to 20% indoors and 30% outdoors of capacities within the venues. We will be introducing all NOCs to COVID precautions that the organizing committee will be taking to ensure the safety of all participants. Precautions for accommodation. In order to limit contact and prevent the transmission of disease, the following services will be found at all official accommodations. Temperature screening at accommodation entrances. Hand disinfectants readily available throughout the hotels. 2 disposable masks shall be given to all accredited persons each day of the event. Daily cleaning of rooms where towels, linens are daily replaced. Limitations of certain public areas which do not comply with the prevention guidelines, such as saunas and steam rooms. As part of the COVID-19 prevention guidelines, participants involved in the games should not be exposed to external contact with those outside the bubble for the entire duration of the games. If contact is necessary, the NOC COVID-19 officer and the IMAC organizing committee should be made aware immediately. Catering COVID-19 protocols. Meals will be provided by the accommodation venue with limited capacity of meal times in order to reduce overcapacity in confined spaces. In accordance with the OCA COVID-19 guidelines, the following issues are highlighted. Contact with hotel staff in the dining area should be minimized. There should be no self-service buffet meals. The hotel staffs will serve all the meals. Drinks should be served at the table by staff at a drink station. Hotel staff should distribute all cutlery and plates. Chairs and tables must ensure physical distancing is maintained. Team-designated tables must be used and respected by all delegations. Face masks should be worn when entering and leaving the dining rooms. Face masks are not to be placed on tables and must be kept on person's possession. Time spent in the dining room should be kept at a minimum. Tables will be clearly cleaned by hotel staff immediately after they are vacated. Transportation guidelines. With respect to all transportation, every individual must wear a mask. An empty seat shall be kept between two persons. Hand sanitizers should be provided at the bus entrances and exits. Temperature screening must take place before boarding. Persons who develop any symptoms of COVID-19 are not allowed to enter the bus. For bigger vehicles, such as buses, all staff, including drivers and stakeholders, must maintain a distance of 1.5 meters at all times. More information on the relevant COVID-19 protocols regarding transportation, accommodation, and catering will be sent to all NOCs.